In Palestine, Israel's criminal attacks against civilians in Gaza continues. More than 20 Palestinians were killed and dozens injured in the latest shelling of residential buildings in Southern Gaza. In Belgium, thousands took to the streets to demand better public services, salaries, and living conditions. And in Vietnam, Chinese President Xi Jinping arrived for a two-day state visit to strengthen bilateral ties under the premise of promoting a shared future. More than 20 Palestinians were killed and dozens were injured in Israeli shelling of residential buildings in southern Gaza Strip. The Palestinian agency Wafa reported that 20 civilians were martyred in an attack by Israeli warplanes on several houses in the city of Rafah, where people are still missing under the rubble. In turn, 2 Palestinians were killed and several wounded in an artillery attack on the city of Khan Yunis. Operation planes also carried out a series of shelling around Nasser Hospital in the city after 67 days of the total siege of the Gaza Strip. The number of people killed by Israel has reached 18,205, most of them children and women, while the number of wounded is already close to 50,000 and the number of displaced people is close to 2 million.
The Jewish Israelis say this was a safe zone. They say the west of Salahedin Street. This is a safe zone, but there is no safe zone in all Gaza Strip. They say the south is safe, Rafah is safe. Where is the security in Rafah? Every day there are strikes in Rafah. There is no safe zone.
At the same time, Israeli occupation forces killed 4 Palestinians in Jenin amid violent assaults and arrests in several locations in the occupied West Bank. The assassinations took place in the midst of a violent assault by the occupation army on Jenin and its refugee camp. Local sources report that Israeli soldiers raided many houses after invading them with military bulldozers and amid clashes with the Palestinian resistance in different areas. In addition, they report that Zionist snipers were stationed on the roofs of residential buildings and that Israeli forces surrounded the governmental hospitals in Ibn Sina, Jenin, and Al-Razi, preventing ambulances from transporting the dead Palestinians. On the other hand, military incursions and arrests were reported in Askar Camp, Aqaba City, and Silwat, where soldiers arrested, among others, a 12-year-old boy. At a cabinet meeting in Ramallah, Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammad Shtayyeh condemned the U.S. for supporting Israel.
We condemn anyone who encourages Israel to continue its killings. We closely monitor the United States policy, marked by chaos and international confusion in their support for Israel. While claiming to be against the killing of civilians, the United States obstrues the Security Council resolutions to halt the war. This unconditional support for Israel occurs without Israel adhering to the rules of international humanitarian law.
On the other hand, U.S. President Joe Biden reiterated his unconditional support for Israel and that he will continue to provide military assistance to this country.
Tough spot. We continue to provide military assistance to Israel until they get rid of Hamas. But we have to be careful. They have to be careful. The whole world's public opinion can shift overnight. We can't let that happen. As I said after the attack, my commitment to the safety of the Jewish people and the security of Israel and its right to exist is independent. As an independent Jewish state is unshakable.
On Monday, police in the United States arrested Jewish demonstrators who called on President Joe Biden to stop Israel's genocide against the Palestinian population of the Gaza Strip. Police officers at the United States Capitol in Washington arrested more than 40 people protesting on the grounds of the Hart Senate building. The statement issued by the authorities claimed that the individuals were conducting an illegal protest and were arrested for obstruction and resisting arrest. The Jewish communities have organized several mobilizations in the United States in support of the Palestinian cause to condemn Israel's war crimes and to call on U.S. President Joe Biden to call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Meanwhile, also in the United States, in New York City, demonstrators called for freedom for Palestine in front of the headquarters of the United States mission to the United Nations on the day of the global strike for Gaza. From there, they condemned the agency's inaction and the White House's veto of a resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. In Chile, demonstrators waved Palestinian flags and chanted slogans to show their support for Palestinians amid the ongoing Israel genocide in Gaza. A police water cannon attempted to disperse the crowd in front of the embassy. Wadia Nasrallah Mohor, a Palestinian living in Chile, said U.S. opposition to a ceasefire cannot go unpunished. The United States vetoed a humanitarian ceasefire resolution in the UN Security Council on Friday. Meanwhile, Israel has pushed its military offenses deeper into the Gaza Strip, and willingness to discuss a ceasefire is waning, according to Qatari mediators. More than 18,000 Palestinians have been killed since the war began, and about 90% of Gaza's 2.3 million people have been displaced inside the besieged territory, where UN agencies say there is no safe place to flee. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back from the south. European Union authorities reported the number of migrants using the Mediterranean route increased dramatically during 2023. The European Border and Coast Guard Agency Frontex said that the total number of migrants arriving in the European Union by non-regular means exceeded 355,000 at the end of last November. The Central Mediterranean route, marked by crossing to Italy from Tunisia or Libya, continued to be the most common route of entry to the European continent. Frontex warned that its figures are not exhaustive, as they only include migrants processed by government officials and not those entering the bloc undetected. As the number of refugees soars around the world, the United Nations is urging countries at a global summit this week to help displaced people and refrain from populist anti-migrant rhetoric.
They manipulate, they create a fear of people coming to Europe, in this case for asylum or for work. Migrants also have rights. They create a hostility in order to gain votes. So this is a political manipulation. The negative narrative that it is impossible and the only way is to close the borders and push them back is wrong and not useful.
Indonesia urged more international assistance in the resettlement of Rohingya Muslim refugees following the increased number of people having arrived in the country's northernmost Aceh province in the last month. On Tuesday, Foreign Office spokesman Muhammad Iqbal told the press that the refugee problem had been tackled very slowly. Therefore, the government had asked the signatory countries and the international community to take further responsibility for efforts to resolve the plight of the Rohingya refugees. More than 1,500 Rohingya refugees have arrived by boat since November. Some were denied landing by residents of Aceh Utara district and Sabang Island, raising concerns among human rights organizations. UNHCR in Indonesia recorded 1,674 Rohingya refugees in 7 different locations, 4 of which are unsuitable for even a few days' stay.
The most important is really to identify new sites, because currently there are too many refugees that are living in unsuitable sites, and that's also important for the local communities, right? That they see that that refugees are not living in a coconut field, for example. That's not a appropriate place to live. So we are working on that, while also ensuring, together with our partners, the provision of humanitarian assistance. So I think it's very important that we don't inflate the rejection. It is not everywhere, and there is also many Indonesian and Achinese that understand that there is a need for help. Temporary, yes, but it is important that we help. If we don't help, you will have a humanitarian catastrophe in front of you.
In Pakistan on Tuesday, an attack by an explosive-laden vehicle on the main gate of a police station in the northwest of the country left 23 soldiers dead. Local authorities also confirmed more than 30 wounded and the collapse of a police station. Meanwhile, the army said that prior to the vehicle ramming, several militants tried to enter the compound in the Dera Ismail Khan district but failed and 6 attackers were killed. A militant group linked to the Pakistani Taliban claimed responsibility for Tuesday's attack. Strikes by militant groups in Pakistan have been on the rise, especially in its regions bordering Afghanistan after the hardline Islamist militant group Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan withdrew from a ceasefire on 2022. Thousands of demonstrators rallied in Belgium Tuesday demanding better public services, salaries and living conditions. The protests in central Brussels took place during EU negotiations on the new Stability and Growth Pact, which aims to limit member states' debt and deficits. Nations trying to spend their way out of the crisis would instead implement a series of economic policies such as budget cuts and tax increases, but critics say the policies known as austerity won't work. The European Trade Union Confederation, which represents 45 million members, claims the planned reinstatement of the Stability and Growth Pact will force 14 member states to cut a combined 45 billion euros from their budget next year alone. European inflation fell more than expected in November to 2.4%, the lowest in more than 2 years, bringing some relief to households hit hard by the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic and the conflict in Ukraine.
People deserve to live in dignity, to have decent salaries, to have good working conditions, and they are not getting it from most governments in Europe. And there's austerity measures being imposed, and we demand fair taxation so that there is enough money to go to the public services, and all European citizens, all European workers can live with dignity.
In Haiti, court clerks begin a new day on indefinite strike to demand the compliance of agreements signed with the government in 2017. During the day, protesters demanded the respect of the rights of all employees and claimed the removal of discrimination in wages. Court clerks are advocating for a rise in their fees and the approval of the statute for notaries, which would allow them to enjoy other benefits. Meanwhile, the National Association of Haitian Court Clerks informed that the strike will affect the 18 national jurisdictions. On Tuesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived in U.S. Congress to press increasingly reluctant Republicans to back his country's fight against Russia with renewed U.S. military aid. Zelensky was due to meet with leaders in the Senate and House of Representatives before moving on to the White House for talks with President Joe Biden. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made an impassioned plea for continued U.S. military support on Monday in a Washington speech. Republican senators last week blocked a White House request for $106 billion in emergency aid, primarily for Ukraine and Israel. Conservatives say they would refuse the package for the close foreign allies if Democrats and the White House did not also agree to far-ranging immigration reforms targeting security on the politically sensitive U.S.-Mexican border. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. Fun short break, don't go away. Welcome back from the South. On Tuesday, the President of China, Xi Jinping, arrived in Vietnam as a part of a two-day state visit which seeks to strengthen bilateral ties under the premise of promoting a shared future. The President held talks with the General Secretary of the Vietnamese Communist Party, Nguyen Phu Trong, and the country's President, Vo Phan Thuong, with the expectation of taking bilateral relations to a new level. The two sides discussed the improvement of China-Vietnam relations, focusing on 6 main areas, including politics, security, practical cooperation, public support, multilateral affairs, and maritime issues.
I believe that your meeting will be successful and become a new historic mark to bring the bilateral tie between the two countries, the two parties to a new height for the shared hope and interests.
With a focus on seeking development for our countries, people's happiness and progress for mankind, I am willing to work with my Cabinet General Secretary to announce a new positioning for our two countries and parties on the basis of deepening the China-Vietnam Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. We will work together to create a China-Vietnam community with a shared future of strategic significance.
The United Nations ended its mission in Mali after 10 years of deployment in the country. The mission, known as MINUSMA, officially withdrew the flag of the UN this Monday in the capital city of Bamako. The mission's objective was to support the fight against the insurgency in the country after the Tuareg rebellion in 2012. The withdrawal of troops continues to take place a week after the mission completed the departure of its troops and personnel in Sebare. In June, Mali's military government, which took power in 2020, demanded the departure of the mission deployed since 2013, despite being affected by attacks by armed groups in the Sahel region.
In a little more than 2 weeks, MINUSMA will close its door for good, a process that began after the adoption of Resolution 2690, which followed the request by the Malian authorities to withdraw the missions. This process has involved the closure since the beginning of August of 10 of the 13 bases we had in central and northern Mali, as well as in Bamako.
The head of the UN mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo voiced concern on Monday about the escalating risk of direct military confrontation between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda, as Kinshasa calls for a speedier withdrawal of peacekeepers. In recent weeks, the situation in DRC's North Kivu province on the border with Rwanda has further deteriorated, UN envoy Bintou Keita tells the Security Council. Relations between Kinshasa and Kigali, still tense since the major wars of 1990s and 2000s, have soured in the last 2 years with the resurgence of M23 rebels in North Kivu. DRC has accused Rwanda of supporting the Tutsi-led fighters who have seized swathes of land in the east of the country since the launching of an offensive in late 2021. The heightening of regional tensions comes as Kinshasa has asked the world body for the accelerated departure of some 14,000 peacekeepers starting this month, amid public perceptions that the blue helmets are ineffective.
The situation has
further deteriorated in North Kivu. Regional tensions between the DRC and Rwanda have further escalated, heightening the risk of a direct military confrontation that could also draw in Burundi. Today, we are at an important turning point in relations between the United Nations and the DRC, but also at an important moment for the country itself. The DRC is in the middle of a political campaign, 9 days away from presidential, general, national, provincial, and local elections. It is also called for an accelerated, orderly, and responsible withdrawal of MONUSCO.
On Tuesday, Egyptians cast their ballots in the last day of voting in a presidential election that is certain to see President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi secure another term in office. The vote, which began across the country on Sunday, has been overshadowed by the Israeli aggression against Gaza on Egypt's eastern border. The vote also takes place amid a staggering economic crisis in a nation of 105 million people, where nearly a third live in poverty, according to official figures. El-Sisi faces no serious challenger, although there are 3 other candidates. The National Election Authority said that as of noon Monday, 45% of the citizens eligible to vote had cast their ballots. A runoff is scheduled for January 8th to the 10th if no candidate secures more than 50% of the votes. Hopes of ending a critical climate summit on time faded early Tuesday as countries remain far apart on key issues, including an agreement on what to do about the fossil fuels that are causing dangerous global warming. On Monday, critics condemned a draft agreement released in Dubai as a watered-down document that won't stop climate change. On Tuesday, demonstrators rallied just yards away from the plenary building, calling for a phase-out of fossil fuels, fully funded public finance, gender equality, and human rights. The draft document instead called on countries to reduce the consumption and production of fossil fuels in a just, orderly, and equitable manner. The Bangladeshi envoy said a revised draft text would be presented on Tuesday.
So we are here today on this final day to really make sure that the voices of civil society can be heard in the negotiations. Yesterday we heard a lot of governments that were not satisfied with the text, and so we really hope to actually support them as they demand a stronger, a more effective outcome of this climate negotiation. And that's why today we were here to repeat actually the messages that civil society expects a phase out of fossil fuels. Civil society expects that United Nations processes will promote human rights and not undermine them. We expect that developed countries will fulfill their commitment on climate finance because that's critical for effective climate ambition around the world.
Scientists and environmentalists monitoring the West Antarctic ice melt raised the alarm again Tuesday about the global consequences of the rapidly accelerating melting. A study published in the journal Nature Climate Change claims that warming has accelerated to the point that the ice sheet is now experiencing inevitable melting, regardless of how much the world reduces emissions of planet warming gases such as carbon dioxide. In this sense, they say Antarctica is melting more than 3 times faster than it was in the early 1990s. Experts warn of cascading consequences on a global scale, from rising sea levels to increased temperatures and changes in ocean currents. Cesar Cárdenas, a researcher at the Chilean Antarctic Institute, added that what happens in Antarctica does not just stay in Antarctica, but also has an impact on the rest of the planet.
What
happens in Antarctica does not stay only in Antarctica. Nowadays we know the importance of the melting of ice shelves, for example, and how this will affect sea level, not only here on the Antarctic coast, but also given the climate change scenario will cause sea level rise all over the world. Obviously, there will be regions such as the Pacific Island, for example, that will be badly affected. Everything is very connected, and Antarctica influences the rest of the continent at the atmospheric level, and of course that has a key impact on the climate. And in so many other aspects, such as ocean currents, the oxygen-rich ice water that sinks on the coast of the Southern Ocean goes to the bottom and is a conveyor belt, as it is called, that reaches all the oceans of the planet. And when this is affected, it will obviously affect the productivity and the oceans of the entire world.
We have come to the end of this news brief, but before saying goodbye, we want to thank our Caribbean audience, especially the audience of Trinidad and Tobago. We are pleased to share our newscast and contribute to provide an alternative news source of the latest world events. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our social media on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.